Welcome to episode 8 of the Integrated Human Podcast, where we explore holistic health, human potential, and conscious living. Today, we have a very, very special and important topic, in which today we're going to be talking about how the core isn't just about aesthetics, as you see in this photo here. It isn't just about appearance. It isn't just about strength, but it's also about its relation to breathing, spinal stability, nervous system, injury prevention, and ultimately and all impacting the entire physiology or the entire systems of the body. So without further ado, we're going to dig real deep into what the core is, how it functions, why it's important, and how it impacts the entire body. Here we go. In order to understand the core, we need to understand the inner unit of the core. So let's just break this down. You have an outer unit and an inner unit muscular system inside of the body, which consists of tonic muscles and phasic muscles. Tonic muscles are inner unit muscles, and phasic muscles are outer unit muscles. Now, what does that mean? Inner unit muscles are stabilizer muscles. They mainly consist of type 1 muscle fibers. So this means these type of muscles that are closer or the deepest muscles inside of the body actually play a huge role in stability of the body, right? And preventing injury and keeping the integrity of your joints, bones, and tissues intact and together during any given exercise that you perform. Now, phasic outer unit muscles are prime mover muscles, which means these big muscles or superficial muscles that you see on your skin, as you can see here, you see the chest muscles, the deltoid, the biceps, the rectus abdominis. These are superficial or outer unit muscles, which simply means that these type of muscles perform the gross function of a given movement. So let's say you are doing a sprint. So your superficial muscles are propelling you or creating that movement, such as your quadriceps, such as your hamstrings, such as your calf muscles, right? So those that is the differentiation between the inner unit and the outer unit. And to bring that together, the inner unit is what stabilizes before you can move. And this is why the inner unit is so important, is because before you can do any movement, your body needs to stabilize first before that movement is initiated. So for instance, if we take that running example, before you sprint, your body then has to know how to stabilize properly to prevent injury. So without that being said, back to the core, let's talk about the inner unit muscles of the core. As you can see in this diagram here on the right, this shows the inner unit of the core, which contains the multifidus in the back on the vertebrae, the diaphragm, which creates the C shape, and the transverse abdominis, which comes around, meets the pelvic floor at the bottom, and that wraps around and creates a loop back into the multifidus. So this is your inner unit core. I mean, these are the muscles it consists of. And these muscles create a cylinder, as you can see, which creates what is called intra-abdominal pressure, which is this pressure that is very important for spinal stability and stability in of itself to keep the integrity and the foundation and protection of your joints to prevent you from injury. So let's talk about the mechanics of how this inner unit functions. So your lungs are above your diaphragm, right? These is where your lungs are. Let me draw that here. Let's just call, I'm not a good drawer, but let's just say these is where your lungs are, right? So as you take a deep inhale, your lungs expand with air, right? So as they expand, they actually push or come down and drop due to all the air filling inside of the diaphragm, which then, or all the air filling inside of the lungs, which then the diaphragm's mechanism for the lungs to inhale or inflate with air is the diaphragm drops down to create that space, right? So now that the diaphragm drops down to create space for the lungs, it then puts pressure on the organs all in here, right? This space is all where your organs are, right? Liver, kidney, etc., etc. So now that the diaphragm is creating space for the lungs to inflate with air, the organs are being squished down, which then the transverse abdominis job, or let's call this is where your belly button is, part of your belly expands and pushes out this way to relieve that pressure, right? So this is the mechanism of an inhale of your inner unit muscles working, right? So let's talk about the exhale. So now during the exhale, the transverse abdominis pulls the belly button into the spine, right? As you can see here with my arrow. As that pulls into the spine, the organs can go back up into their normal position, in which the diaphragm comes back into this position as you see, as the lungs here rise back up as they deflate with air, right? So this is the function or proper adequate breathing mechanics of your core. And this is extremely, extremely important, in which we're going to get into um, improper breathing patterns causing lots of different issues and challenges later in this explanation. So hopefully that makes sense as we move on. So let's erase all of these markings so you can see what we have going on. Let's stick in our pen if we can, which I don't think so, which is fine. Okay, so let's talk about the pressure cylinder. So as we spoke about, the inner unit here looks like a cylinder, which creates a canister like action, right? Which creates intra-abdominal pressure, right? And this intra-abdominal pressure is highly necessary to protect your body. It's a protective mechanism to create stability in your abdominal region to protect your spinal segments, aka your vertebrae in your spine, and ultimately your outer extremities, such as your hips, legs, and arms, and etc. So, how do you lack intra-abdominal pressure? Well, you're going to lack intra-abdominal pressure if any one of these inner unit muscles are inhibited or not operating effectively due to being weak, right? So, let's talk about the transverse abdominis here. Someone who has a weak transverse abdominis or inhibition in here means that they will lack the ability to relax and contract the muscle on demand, right? Because it's inhibited and weak. And in so being, this is going to interrupt with the breathing pattern mechanics of the belly button expanding outward to create space for the organs as the diaphragm drops down to create space for the lung as it inhales with air or fills up with air. And then they will also have trouble exhaling all the way in to allow the organs to come back up into their original position as the diaphragm falls into its original place and as the lungs exhale air. So when there's inhibition or weakness in any of these muscle groups, it actually disturbs the feedback loop or the flow of this breathing mechanic that also creates spinal stability and impacts other things inside of the body. So again, breathing is directly correlated to stability. And in so breathing properly, as we mentioned through the function of the inner unit, there's a big exchange taking place inside of the lungs where oxygen and carbon dioxide have this meet, right? In these like terminal type areas inside of the capillaries. So as you can see my lung drawing here, I'll draw a bigger version of the lungs. Let's go one, let's go two, let's connect them. Cool. So as you take proper breaths, diaphragmatic breaths, expanding the belly and then exhaling, pushing the belly back into the spine and really taking that full breath, you're allowing for oxygen to really be brought in through the system. And as you exhale, you're releasing that oxygen out through your mouth, which is allowing carbon dioxide to accumulate inside of the body to allow the transfer of oxygen to carbon dioxide inside of the system. So let's break this down. In the lungs, there are tiny, tiny veins called capillaries or blood vessels, things of that nature. They're very, very, very tiny. And this is where carbon dioxide or waste metabolites or metabolic waste passes through here as you exhale it out. And then as you inhale, bringing in oxygen, it passes through these terminals. So When you inhale, that oxygen comes inside of these capillary beds, and the metabolic waste material comes inside these capillary beds, and they have an exchange process. But it's only the adequate amount of time exhaled that this exchange can take place. So if you don't practice exhaling properly, you don't allow carbon dioxide to build up inside of the lungs, which actually is what facilitates oxygen to be absorbed and utilized and pulled into different cells of the body. So contrary to what we believe, we think oxygen is like the number one goal, taking as many breaths as we can, but actually slowing down the breath and learning how to exhale and hold the breath out, pulling the belly button into the spine, allows oxygen to be absorbed better to the system. So really quickly, I'm going to show you an example of dysfunctional breathing patterns, and also what a weak core looks like and how that affects posture. And we're also going to talk about how this affects the entire physiology, including hormones of the body. So first of all, let's look at this guy here, right? First and foremost, right off the rip, we see this person's transverse abdominis is inhibited and weak due to this huge amount of lower abdominal distension. So this right here tells me that this person is not going to be able to take a full breath, which means that they're going to be lacking oxygen, which means that they're going to be lacking blood flow, which means they'll be lacking nutrition for the body, right? So as we see, since this transverse abdominis is so distended and so elongated, it's weak. So that means this person more than likely will have a hard time bringing the belly button back into its original place during an exhale because he's so distended, right? So in order to compensate for this huge amount of issue, he's going to have to begin to start breathing through his chest. And this is where it gets really important. So chest breathing is what stimulates his sympathetic response. So let's break this down. You have two sides of your nervous system. Shorten this up for you guys. You have two sides of your autonomic nervous system. You have your parasympathetic and you also have your sympathetic. So let's break this down. Let's start with parasympathetic. The parasympathetic is directly tied with a diaphragmatic breath. So this is when you're breathing and inhaling properly because your inner unit muscles are operating effectively. So what we talked about, the transverse abdominis expanding during the inhale and then pulling in during the exhale. That's a diaphragmatic breath that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Coincidentally, the parasympathetic nervous system is also where anabolic and growth hormones are produced, right? And also, the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest nervous system. So this means this side of the system is responsible for rejuvenation of cells, bones, organs, tissues, muscles, etc., etc., etc. It's only this side of the nervous system in which you can actually rebuild and recuperate, right? And heal. And it's only stimulated, or there are only two ways you can breathe, right or wrong, right? Through the chest or through the belly, right? So it's when you breathe diaphragmatically, properly through the lower abdominal region, low stomach region, as you can facilitate a parasympathetic state, which is going to produce healthy hormones, which is going to rebuild your tissues because it's the rest and digest state. So it also is going to increase your digestive fire or your ability to digest, assimilate, and eliminate foods inside of the system and that you consume. So let's move on. Let's talk about the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is directly tied to chest breathing. And this system this system is the fight or flight system. So this system is directly tied to stress. And in this system, it creates stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, right? And this system is catabolic. And catabolic simply means tissue destructive, which means it breaks the body down. So let's break it down. So chest breathing facilitates a sympathetic dominant state. And in this state, this is a fight or flight state, which in this state, a fight or flight means stress state. And in this stress state, it prioritizes the production of stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, in which stress hormones are tissue destructive. They're catabolic hormones, meaning they break the body down. So imagine this. You breathe every second of the day. So think about how just by breathing wrong can keep you inside of a sympathetic dominant state, which keeps you in this vicious cycle of stress hormones and stress being accumulated inside of the body, which is over time breaking your tissues down and allowing you to, have injuries, have different dysfunctions within your organs, have mental health issues, all of these different things, all because of your breathing pattern is wrong, right? So this is crucial, crucial, crucial information that we need to understand when we talk about breathing. So again, let's look back at this picture. Since this man has a inhibited, weak, lengthened transverse abdominis that's not functioning properly, he can't take a full breath, which means his air is trapped in his chest, and now he's facilitating a sympathetic dominant state all the time, which is creating fight or flight stress response, which is creating stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline, which these hormones are catabolic, which means they're tissue destructive, which means he's breaking his body down over time. Something as simple as breathing is doing all these things. So this is extreme key information. Now, let's move on to how posture begins to get affected, or let's leave this here for you. How posture gets affected and how this affects spinal stability. So let's take a look at this guy here. So this guy on the left-hand side is him with terrible posture. So take a look at his transverse abdominis, which is lacking tone. It's very weak, which is why it's causing his stomach here to be distended, which means his organs are actually drooping, right? And since his organs are drooping and they're not in the right place, it's causing his rib cage to actually droop down as well, which, as you can see, his chest and his shoulders are actually pointing more towards the ground. So this is very, very, very important information, because now that his ribs are pointing to the floor, the ribs are actually in the way of him taking a full breath, which is going to keep the air trapped inside of his chest here. So now when he takes a breath, he's only going to be able to get air in through the chest, which is going to do what? We already spoke about it. If we come back over here, it's going to facilitate a sympathetic response. Let's move it here. So it's going to create a sympathetic response, which is going to create stress hormone and break his body down. This is where you can see. And now take a look at how this weak transverse abdominis is causing the belly to be distended, which is dropping his chest and his shoulders forward, which is also causing his head, as you can see, to come off his center line, which is creating a lot of tension inside of his neck. So something as simple as breathing is really, really, really impacting the muscular system and also your organs as well. So this is crucial, crucial information. Now, with this man's posture and his body, just take a look at, or sorry, with his posture being compromised, is now going to impact his spinal stability and the stability of his body. So, since his transverse abdominis isn't activated, now he's lacking intra-abdominal pressure and actually core function in his core region, which is going to inhibit the stability in his spine or his back here and neck, because they're all connected, right? So now when he performs movements, whether it be in the gym or through lifestyle, just situations that he does, he is a lot more susceptible to injury, because the inner unit is what is responsible for intra-abdominal pressure, which creates protection and integrity of the joints when you do different exercises to keep you from getting injured. So as we move to the picture here, where he's actually engaging his transverse abdominis effectively because it's toned now the organs are able to come and rest in their natural position. The ribs rise up, allowing for a full diaphragmatic breath to take place. His chest is now back and the shoulders are back, and his head has fallen into his midline, which means there isn't any stress in his neck. So now, all from breathing, has caused his entire muscular system to operate effectively, in which now he can take a full breath through here, which will inflate his belly here. And then as he exhales, his belly or belly button will go back to the spine. And now he's taking a full breath, which is facilitating a parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest state, which is producing anabolic and growth hormones, which are tissue building. Now he can regenerate cells. Now he can relax his body. Now he can digest his food, all because of breathing. So this is crucial, crucial, crucial information. So with that being said, I'm going to give you two things that you can do to resolve this problem, begin reversing poor inner unit conditioning and also poor breathing mechanics to improve the entire body's function, right? The first thing you can do is you can do belly breathing. And let me show you what that is or show you the mechanics of it. So as you can see here, what I want you to do is lie down on your back with your lower back on the floor. So if your lower back is not on the floor, that means you can slide your hand under your low back easily. If you can, you don't want that. You need to turn or tilt your pelvis and bring your hips down, in which your lower back will start to hug the floor. Now that you're in that proper position, I just want you to place one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest. Now that you're here, when you take a full breath, I want your belly, as you can see here, to protrude out as you inhale. That's a diaphragmatic, full, proper breath. And as you exhale with your hand on your chest as well, as you exhale, I want you to pull that stomach back in, as you can see here. So, with that being said, what I don't want you to do is I don't want your hand that's on your chest to come up. So if your hand that's on your chest is coming up before your belly pops out, then you're breathing through your chest, in which is not going to be a good thing to do. So remember, you want the hand that's on the belly to extend first. And as you exhale, you want the hand that's on the belly to come all the way in into your stomach as it pulls in. So that's how you restore proper breathing mechanics. And now let's talk about proper exercise that you can do to adequately condition your transverse abdominis and your core so you can learn how to stabilize your spine. Okay, so here we go. So this is the exercise. You're going to be on the ground, and notice how his low back here is on the floor. So you don't want to slide your hand under your low back. If you can slide your hand under your low back, you need to tilt your pelvis here and rotate it up that way. That way the low back is hugging on the floor. Now that it's hugging on the floor, I want you to bring your knees and feet together, keeping just slight pressure into them. That way they stick together. And then you're going to raise all the way up, curl your pelvis, and you're going to come back down, as you can see, and hover over the floor and come up, curl the pelvis, bring it up, and come down. So that's exactly how you condition the core, so you can create proper strength inside of the core, intra-abdominal pressure, protect the spine, and ultimately prevent injury, increase your breathing mechanics to impact your hormones and all that kind of stuff. So that being said, this was a lecture on the core and how it's not just about aesthetics and how good your abdominals look. There's actually very small, intricate muscles deeper inside of the core that are responsible for adequate breathing and the protection of the spine, which helps you prevent yourself from injury, and also through proper breathing mechanics, through the firing of your inner unit core muscles, you're going to impact your nervous system, which is going to impact your hormonal health, which is going to impact your stress levels, which is going to impact your sleep patterns, blood sugar, and all those things. So it's very, very, very crucial to really tune into this lecture and really understand the information that I'm putting down and giving to you so you can live optimally. So again, this was episode 8. I hope this was great. Share this with a friend. Share this with somebody who would benefit from this. And leave me a comment. Leave me some information and some feedback on how you felt and how good this information was in terms of me breaking it down for you. Peace.